A piece of architecture can be many things, but it's most inevitably the organization of spaces and matter and volumes and forms. So with this cover image, I wanted color to fade into the background and form to come into the foreground. I first arranged the project, and they're not in chronological order, they're placed for the composition of the image as a whole. I placed them and then started taking away color from areas that didn't warrant them, and adding a strong pink and a muted blue to areas to emphasize volume and geometry and form. And this is the cover image I ended up with. For this video, I will be going in chronological order. This is the Alma House. It's got many sources of inspiration. Firstly, there was a guy named Nikos Salingaros who my professor Gita Mehta invited to talk to us when I was in grad school. And Nikos and Gita talked to us a lot about the importance of breaking things down to the human scale and not having volumes be massive and bland. Now, this is even more important for large-scale public buildings, but as an architect, I want my work to be distinctive. So I'm applying this to this residential piece of architecture as well, and using this relentless grid to help me identify points at which to break down the geometry. Nikos Salingaros is heavily influenced by Christopher Alexander, who we worked for, and Christopher Alexander is also a huge influence for me. When I was designing this, I was a hungry young designer, and I wanted the viewer to see the house through my eyes, from both the exterior and the interior of the building. What I ended up doing was embedding the grid lines that I had set up in the drawing into the architecture by having them articulate throughout the building. The lines can be read continuously as a reveal or the edge of a door or a window from the inside or the outside, with the exception of a few intentional glitches. The most heavily used spaces, bedrooms, living room, dining room, kitchen, are placed on the second and third floors, leaving the first floor with parking and guest quarters, which is not always in use. And you could argue this makes sense given potential flooding risks being by the beach. This angled cut here frames the view of the ocean, while the overhang above it shades the space from the sun of the southwest. We've got this color-coded series of models that started with this project. Now, this project had gone through many iterations. Floor plan changes from the client early on, and then corrections from the authority having jurisdiction, and then a bunch of iterations I went through because I just wasn't happy with how it looked. But once the design was finalized, I think this was even before we had the building permit, I printed out the floor plans and elevations that I had done at 1/4 of an inch equals a foot, whipped out my cutting mat and my Olfa knife and my tacky glue from architecture school that I still had, and started making this guy. I wanted to make it as visually striking as possible, so I used the staircase to create a potential hangout space like Spanish steps do, and made a very clear colonnade on one side of it.
And he went. The first day he went, they shot bows and arrows at him, and shot a bow and arrow and landed. It like cut him and hit his Bible.
Whoa.
And
they were aiming for the Bible?
They weren't aiming for the Bible. I guess the Bible kind of like stopped it. I don't know the whole why it stopped, but then he went back to the hotel, and then he prayed about it, and he decided to go back out there the next day. And he went back out there the next day, and the people dropped him off again, and no one ever heard from him anymore. It's a story that I think you should. It's worth.
I thought having things aligned as much as possible was the way to go. And I wanted to incorporate parts that were moving and shifting because I thought that really represented a contemporary architectural movement. So one day I was staring at this model right after I finished making it, and I saw a version of it in my head that had this whole form made out of some transparent plexiglass-like material. And on the interior, there were program blocks showing the inner spaces. So the garage, the guest quarters, the bedrooms, and the living, dining, and kitchen. And that stayed in my head for a little bit. I still think it might be cool to see that at 1/4 of an inch equals a foot scale. But for the sake of time, I made it at 1/16 of an inch equals a foot. And here it is. Circulation is in red. Hallways and restrooms are in different shades of gray. Dark orange is the garage, and beige is living, dining, kitchen. Guest quarters down there is also beige because it's like a studio. It's a 500 square foot space, including the wall thickness. So inside is like 480 or whatever it is. And it's just an open space. And this wall on the exterior was pushed in just a little bit to give that to the backyard rather than give it to the garage. The next project is the Louise House. It's zoned as a piece of land in the RA zone, or the residential agricultural zone. The first floor contains the living, dining, and kitchen spaces, along with 1 bedroom and a 2-car garage. And the second floor has 4 bedrooms and a laundry room. The roof also acts as a habitable deck. There's this open to below feature that creates a double height space and encourages more interaction within the home. The double height space is framed from the main entry and the rear entry, and I like to think of it as sort of a portal. The front north facing elevation breaks down the mass to visually manageable parts. The rear south-facing elevation contains formal extensions for built-in blocking of the harsh summer sun. And I'm not arguing that this is purely about the performance of the building, because I'm looking at this elevation with my artist brain and forming it. On this balcony, again, I use the strategy of angling it towards the view. My initial renderings are on top versus reality on the bottom. These are the study models done at 1/16 of an inch equals a foot. And on the one on the left there, you see the double height space with the beige poking through the hallway and the vertical circulation in red. Here's the other view of it. Next project is the Hill Drive edition. We designed and permitted this bathroom addition in 2017. The space is now being rented through Airbnb with its own restroom, and the owner of the property lives on the floor above. Before the addition we designed, the gray area within the walls didn't contain a finished floor, but loose soil. We designed the platform to contain the new restroom and the closet. Since the completion of the structure, the client has been monetizing the space through Airbnb. And then we have our first prototype for a high-rise office building. The large bevels create a distinct sense of space within and a distinctive envelope from the exterior. The varying widths make for slightly different experiences on each floor of the building. 4 facade strategies are incorporated and placed in order to minimize unwanted heat and maximize natural daylighting. Here's the model showing the program breakdown and the form. In orange on the bottom we see the lobby, and then grays are different office zones, and purple is the common space, which has open elements and a restaurant and a lot of plants, and on top there in beige is the rooftop bar. Next we have some schematic phase services that I was hired to offer for a community center. This project, the North Hollywood Community Center, was a research project. I was hired in the programming phase before site selection even, in order to assist the client with site selection. So here we're looking at the potential building area. I described it through small, medium, and large options. And here we're looking at a potential organizational strategy of the community center that's somewhere between the small and the medium from the last image. I made this in Rhino, gave different layers, different colors, screenshotted it, took it to Illustrator, and gave it the chart on the right, looking at the square footages. Here's what a rough schematic floor plan would look like, just drawn by pencil, and some interior renderings made off of a very rough 3D model. By the way, every project in this video was fully done in Rhino. I transitioned to Revit after the 8th project we're going to see in here. Project number 6, the 1984 house. The program is arranged to minimize cutting and filling of site soil. These are Rhino screenshots. The design was killed pretty early, but it's going to live in my portfolio, and it'll probably inform a future project at some point. The house number for this project happened to be 1984, and shared with the number of the title of the novel by George Orwell. When it became clear that this project wasn't going to be constructed, it compelled me to title the project with the number. Not that I think it's some dystopian reality because of the fact that most architects' designed buildings don't end up being realized. The mystery of unbuilt work does have its own captivating nature in a way. Up next is the Twitch house. I documented the entire schematic design portion of this house on Twitch, hence the name. Project 7. The site itself kind of asks for the area to be distributed across 3 stories, despite being only 1,400 square feet. The site is really steep. This is where the spatial organization of the form described by the programming model begins to be articulated and developed further. Like most houses that are accessed from the higher side of a steep hill, it displays a small, unsuspecting piece of building from the entry. The process of entry walks the inhabitant through the roof deck. From the rear, the house appears to be a sculpted habitable form within large glass apertures. The distribution of spaces across 3 stories without an elevator probably lends itself to a particular type of buyer. Our client is the developer, not the end user. The next project is an ADU or ADU or ADU. This is our take on California's popular detached accessory dwelling unit. The first floor contains a living, dining, kitchen space and the garage, and the second floor contains 2 bedrooms. The large site allowed us to explore various forms and ultimately select this bend to arrange the program of the ADU along. The raised foundation really creates a sense of podium under the entry. Skylights are placed carefully to add more daylight to both stories. Here you see the open floor plan of the first floor. Here are some more exterior shots. Thank you so much for watching. As you know, I've been uploading every single week this year. Granted, some weeks were shorts or lives. It wasn't always a long format edited video like this. I hope you've been enjoying the content. Make sure you're subscribed to keep up with the upcoming content. Hit that bell, and I'll see you next week with more recent work and a lot more rough, schematic, diagrammatic, in the process, in the works type stuff. You don't want to miss it. Take care.